Thank you. Welcome to Rising Tides Live. Mike Bisceglia, Kyle Pflueger here, filling in for Shawn Walchef. We're talking about production and the production machine, all things Cali BBQ production, and then we'll hear from members of the audience and the community that will come up and talk about their production and their production process. Kyle, looking forward to getting into this chat with you. I've been with Cali BBQ now for about a year, which is crazy. It's been great working together. I've learned a lot being next to you and seeing some of the processes and production process you put in place. So looking forward to having this conversation and hearing your expertise, hearing the group. I think we'll have fun with it. So what's up, Kyle? Good to see you.
Yeah, what's up, man? Likewise, excited to dive into this today. I've taken a circuitous route back to being someone in charge of process and project management. That's where I started my career, and then I went full-time freelance and solo for a long time and sort of had to figure out how to manage my own self. And now here we are back years later with a nice big team. And I think a fairly well-oiled machine these days that keeps our production processes in a good place. So excited to dive into what that looks like.
Yeah, I always tell people this because I think it's really interesting, because I think a lot of when we do production and the output that people get is really a creative, if it's a creative design for a podcast cover art, if it's a YouTube thumbnail, if it's a podcast in general, if it's whatever it might be, it's such a creative, beautiful piece of art. But whenever I'm like talking to people about it, I always lay out how much of an actual process it is to make that. So even though it's like this creative genius in a sense, like any other piece of art, I always view it with, there's so much like step one, step two, even though when you see the final product, I don't want people to think like that, but there is such a, process of start to finish that goes into making whatever it is that we are making.
There is, yeah, and I think there's a delicate balance of the art of this and the science of this, and that's something that a former mentor of mine really hit home for me when I worked for startups for many years as a product manager, where product manager sits at a really interesting spot in the company where they are sort of directly responsible to reporting to the C-suite level. They're taking feedback directly from customers, but then they've also got to speak a technical language with the engineering team. And their job is to basically make sure all of those things work in concert together. And it's an interesting thing to think about, that there is a science to that, but there's an art to how you approach it as well. And so I love when you use the analogy of, it's a creative process. Take a podcast episode, there's an organic feel to most, any good podcast is going to feel organic. It's going to feel natural. It's going to feel genuine, and you want to bring out the best in that. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of stuff that has to happen behind the scenes from a production standpoint to actually bring that thing to life and make it a piece of content that A, you want to publish as the publisher, and B, more importantly, that the person that we want to listen to it's going to actually want to consume. So it's definitely not a magic wand. Those, some tools today are making it a little bit easier, and I think we're getting closer to magic wand maybe than we've ever been before. But there's still a lot that goes into it, and figuring out how to optimize those processes is a big part of, I think, something that we do well, and something that we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, but also something that we're continually learning and trying to get better at.
Yeah, the learning and getting better at, I always look back at and reflect on myself, because I wrote an email for my dad. I wrote an email I was sending to my dad. I'm helping him produce a podcast, and I wrote an email out and I gave information and instructions, and he was like blown away with how good the email looked. And he was like, I don't remember you having emails that look like this. Like what? And I just think back and reflect on just all the stuff that's happened in years past to get better at communication and laying out info, like to that project management aspect of it, and just trying my best to make sure that people can understand what I'm doing or trying to conquer. So when you said that, it really hit home for me, just all the experience that's happened to get better and trying to evolve and get better. And I think, one of the interesting things about putting content in the production process, especially when you're working with other people and clients, is, everybody has like different ways of viewing things and seeing things. So there's always, like, for me in a production process, learning who I'm working with and then trying to figure out the best mechanism to make sure that information is always relayed. When you said that, like, it just got me thinking, like, that's like the part I'm always trying to get better at. How do I get what the production I'm doing to make sure this person understands, especially if they're from a non-production world as well,
Sure.
so that they can outline and see, like, where we're going with this, how we'll get there. And that's something I'm just consistently trying to get better at.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it's a really important point that we all collectively, as professionals, as creatives, as producers, as editors, whatever role, whatever we're doing along the way, we all bring our own background, our own experiences to things. And it's, to me, like mission critical that we're able to not only recognize that, but take those things into account and put them into practice, because I think everyone has something to offer. They've got a different way of looking at things. Something that I've learned with working with a lot of different roles across different companies, and specifically working in a sense where I need to listen to the feedback from them, is that an engineer is going to give you feedback in a much different way than a client is, and a CEO is, or a designer is going to, or a producer is going to. And being able to take all of that stuff and distill it down into a process that, for me, I think the most important thing, if we start getting into some of the nuts and bolts of like what makes a good process, it has to be something that everybody is willing to buy into. And the only way you get everyone to buy into it is by listening to what everybody actively needs. Otherwise, you're just going to be chasing your tail, asking people to update something here, asking someone else to do something here. Whether we're talking about the tools, whether we're talking about, whatever meetings we try to have on the books, whatever that process actually looks like, the buy-in is the first and absolutely most critical part of the process. And like I said, the only way that works, the only way you get that buy-in is if you let everybody have a voice in how you craft the process.
Yeah, and I like, we use Notion for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
our work and tracking at Cali BBQ, and it's been extremely helpful for me in keeping organized and understanding what goes where. And from my perspective as a producer, it's an interesting role, because I always look at the producer as somebody that doesn't that has their hand in a little bit of everything, but
Mm-hmm.
isn't the person that's doing the bulk of the work in certain spots. Like, I'm not a lot of times video editing. I'm not a
Sure.
lot of times writing something, but I'm always going from start to finish and making sure that all those touch points get accomplished. Like, I'm communicating with the writers, I'm communicating with the video person, I'm communicating with who's in social media, and the producer just has their hand in everybody along that wheel, but doesn't have, like, for example, I'm not sitting there for 7 hours editing a video. Maybe I'm looking
Sure.
at something for an hour giving feedback. So I always look at, like, the production process from a producer standpoint. I always thought was a little unique, as you have your hand in a little bit of everything, but sometimes you're not fully on board with just one certain part of the process.
Yeah, you highlight something that I think doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the striking a balance within a team between generalists and specialists. And I think it's really important to have people that are good at both. And I think there's something to be said about being so good at being a generalist that in itself becomes a bit of a specialty, which I know that that's some mental gymnastics to
Yeah.
kind of work through there. But that was something I remember sitting in a sort of a corporate setting, a job I had many years ago. They had hired an outside firm to come in. They gave us the personality quizzes, basically trying to help us, figure out like what are our specialties, what are the areas of the company that we can help the most. And it was a more or less a painless exercise, kind of corporate standard operating
Yeah.
procedure, more or less. But I remember, we had a discussion after we had all taken this test, and we were talking with the gal from this this outside company that was in charge of the whole thing. And I remember asking the question of like, well, is it possible to, she kept talking about sharpening the spear as a specialist, like sharpening your spear to make it as, impactful as possible. And I raised the question of like, well, could you sharpen the spear of being a generalist so much that in itself becomes a specialty? And it sort of like, it seemed like a question she probably hadn't gotten before, but it's something I've leaned into because I find myself more so in the generalist camp, a lot more like what you're talking about. Sure, I think we're all going to have things that we excel at. We're all going to have things that we prefer to do. There's going to be things that we're better at than others. I think we're all going to specialize to some extent, but there's a very important value in a jack of all trades approach in certain roles within an organization. And I think it's important when we talk about process, when we talk about building a production engine, we talk about building a machine, is finding people with the skill sets at the right specialties and the right generalizations to make it work for everybody. Because trying to get a specialist, someone that has a very specific skill set, is very laser focused on one thing. Take video editing as an example. Trying to get someone that's really, really good at video editing, you hand something off to them, what you're going to get back is going to look absolutely beautiful. Trying to get them to build a process for an entire team is going to be a tall order a lot of the time. So finding the right people in the right roles to tackle the right things, and listening to the feedback again from all of those people, I think is such an important part of what we've tried really hard to do, and any successful process is going to be built around that.
Yeah, wow, I really like that, Kyle. I never thought of it like that, because I think I always thought of it as a negative for myself in many ways, where I'm like, wow, man, I wish I could have that skill set where I could make that creative genius spot right there. I never looked at it from that perspective, because I think about all the time working with people and they record their episodes, and I help them develop outlines and scripts, and I make little tweaks on these. But it's not like a labor-intensive hours in the writing room working. It's just little spots here and there. Sure. And I always I never looked at it that way. I'm definitely going to now, because I like that a lot.
It's something that I've sort of had to come to terms with over the years as well. Like I said, this is a lot of my own tendencies, and I look back on my life and like any of the things that I've gotten relatively good at, with a few exceptions, like the things that I teach myself and the things that I become passionate about, I usually get to like about average, maybe slightly above average, and I find myself starting to plateau there. Going back to like when I was a teenager, I bought a drum set, right? And shortly after I bought a drum set, I bought a guitar, and like I got good enough to like play in crappy rock bands in high school, and like I can keep up with some classic rock musicians these days, and like we can have some fun, but like I'm never going to be the next John Bonham or Neil Peart. Not many are, but like there's another level there. And it's not to say that those things those aren't worthwhile endeavors, but I think there's something to be said about finding a sense of satisfaction in like getting to a point where like, oh, I'm good enough to do this really well, and I'm good enough to do this better than average. I think a lot of times that is good enough for what we're going for. And if you can disperse that across a wide range of skill sets, I think I think you've built your own value there in a very unique way.
Yeah, no, I love that. Is there, Kyle, was there anything else you wanted to hit on from a production standpoint? I know we got some people in the green room.
Yeah, let's let them in the room. Yeah, let's party.
Right.
Let's let our friends
in. No, I like when you talk about it, because like, okay, I'm hosting now, but I'm also going to use this mouse that's in my right hand, and I'm going to scroll down and let Elizabeth, over produce, Vincenzo, Dean, scroll down again, and Joe.
Hey, what's up, guys?
How y'all doing?
Doing good, thanks.
Cool. So we'll go around. Your name, what you're working on, your titles, what you're doing, and then of course this topic as well. Talk about production. So we'll kick it off, and Elizabeth, go for it.
Gotta find all the buttons, right? No, great topic, and I really enjoyed that, Kyle. Especially that idea of the generalist and the specialist, and realizing who you're talking to, and understanding. They're looking at that. I always think of that proverb about, it's not a Bible proverb. It's like world. What about the elephants with the blind men? There's 5 blind men around this elephant, and one of them says, "Oh, it's a tree trunk," and another one's like, "No, it's a sail on a ship," and the other one's like, "No, it's a snake." And so they're all seeing like portion. Well, they're not seeing. They're only getting that one little portion. And when you think of like a jewel, everybody's looking at their own facet of that, and like the producers are trying to pull in all of, because everybody's bringing that unique perspective, and if the magic happens when it can all come together. Anyway, my name is Elizabeth Doss, and I am a social media content creator, manager, all those things, but I also create motion graphic design, animations for animated GIFs for social media across platforms. If you're curious, reach out. I love that you're talking about the process side of things, because I'm onboarding a new client, and I was thinking about the fact, okay, I need to really, because I have a couple of clients going on, but I'm really trying to hone in on what my process is for my own thing, just like you guys were talking about the Notion stuff, that if you can create systems for yourself, then you make sure that you're not going to drop anything. And so I was laughing about the topic because I've made this, and I know you can't really see what it is, but it's the 5 senses is kind of what I'm thinking of. And so starting with the audio that I have to, like, I'm helping people that have podcasts and vlogs and stuff. And so I have to go out and listen to the content that the raw material. Then I have to sniff out like the parts of it that are either going to make a great story or make a great clip or make a great carousel, and like kind of like collect like the bits of that, then sculpting that into categories as far as making sure we're covering all the different content pillars that they want to make sure that they're talking about, but what kind of content that needs to be done, if they're heavy video, or if they want more carousels, what's like responding in the algorithm. Then the taste is to like savor it and like refine the nuances of the captions and the other stuff, and then schedule it so that the whole world can see it. So that was my process, is like the 5 senses. How can I, but that may not work for you, but thinking through what the process for content creation for you is. This is specific to the fact that I'm working with other people, and I'm taking their raw word clay or their raw like video clay and trying to make something out of it, versus if you're trying to do it yourself, you have to be the one that fills the content tank with ideas. And so thinking through what's the best way for you to collect those ideas and have that net to collect them, whether it's notes on your phone, whether you use voice recording on your phone, whether you're talking to Chat GPT and just like rattling it off and letting it kind of absorb that and form it into thoughts, and or do you just sit down and write it out? You know, for me, I've noticed that I need analog, like, which is so hilarious, because I have to have tactile, like, for the first step before I move to digital, because I have to not be just distracted by the notifications coming in and the other things, but I also love the pen to paper feeling, and it really helps me get my thoughts down. So that's some of the things I was thinking. But anyway, so one question I guess I had for the Cali BBQ team side of things is, how do you guys collect, if you have so many people doing different things, and I'm sure ideas pop in, do you have a central place that you guys drop ideas for topics, for guests, for content, et cetera? I was just curious about how you guys collect all those things and then map those out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Elizabeth. That was I love it. I love the 5 senses too. That's like my number one rule with any process for anything is like, it's just got to work for you. Like it has to be something. Again, it goes back to buy-in. Like you got to be able to buy into it, and it has to be something that you can turn into a habit, right? Like you can make it a repeatable thing that doesn't feel like a chore to do. So like if that's the method that makes sense, is like, I'm going to write on this piece of paper these things, these 5 senses. I love it. It absolutely crushes. But to answer your question, specifically, getting into some of the logistics on the Cali BBQ media side. So I think, Mike mentioned before, we use Notion as kind of our central hub for everything. And with Cali BBQ Media, it's a bit unique because we publish, I don't know, we're probably close to 20 episodes of content internally a week at this point between all of the shows. And when I say internally, I mean stuff that's going out under our brand. Like Cali BBQ Media is the publisher, is the producer. But that doesn't even touch on all of the content that we're producing and helping our clients publish as well. So needless to say, there's a lot to keep track of. We've tried a few different tools over the years. I'm personally a bit of like a task management junkie. I've used just about every single one of them, from Monday.com to ClickUp to Jira to Notion to everything in between. I like all of them for different reasons, but we had tried ClickUp in the past. This is a great example of like adapting and listening to feedback. The feedback from the team at Cali BBQ Media is ClickUp was just a little bit too complicated. Like there's too much flexibility there, and it was kind of hard for us to really settle in with that. So we've been using Notion for probably a year, maybe ish, about that now.
Yeah.
And I think it has a really nice balance of like simplicity, but still being able to capture everything that we need. There's flexibility and simplicity. There's a good balance there. So Notion is the tool, but I will say this, that at the end of the day, Notion or ClickUp or whatever other tool you decide to use is really just the means to an end. It's always got to come back to like the buy-in on things. So we use that for our central hub, and then Slack is our primary form of communication internally with the team. And to give you a little bit behind the curtains, what it looks like on Slack for us. Typically when we onboard a new client, speaking to what you're talking about, Elizabeth, of like, all right, we got a new client coming on board. What does this actually need to look like? How do I actually bring this to life for them? Typically what we'll do is we create a dedicated Slack channel that is a shared channel between us and the client. So it has whoever on the Cali BBQ Media side is working on things for that client, whether it's the producers, the editors, the leadership team, whatever that looks like. And then likewise, we sort of open invite on their side, whoever from their side of things they want to bring in. So we have a shared space for communication. And that is, I would say, one of the most pivotal things that we've done. Like that is one of the most game-changing things that we've implemented in the way of process that is like just made things so much easier, because we have one place to go. We're not juggling through inboxes. We know where to look if we need information about a specific thing. And then in addition to that, the other thing we do is we set up an internal channel dedicated to that client in Slack. And so that's just Cali BBQ Media staff. So as we're going through production, we're not busying up a channel with a bunch of noise. It's like, hey, did we get the edits back from the editor? Or, hey, we still need copy for this thing, or when are social clips going? Like, we're able to have internal communications about the deliverables that we're working on. And then once they're ready to go for the client, we can, ship them into that channel. So there's a few different things, but we've really tried to simplify that as much as we can, because again, to quote our fearless leader in Shawn Walchef, if you confuse, you lose. So we do our best to make it as simple and streamlined as possible.
Yes, and I did see Shawn's comment, because I guess he's watching online. Hey, Shawn, on YouTube, that he's saying that mobile first for him, and thinking through who's using this, and are they at their computer, or do they need to be like out and about being able to access it? So I know that Notion, you can have an app on your computer and on your phone as well, and all of those things sync up and talk. So, and same with Slack, I believe. Yeah.
And Elizabeth, I'm ready for Pitch the Tide next year when you have your 5 Senses production tool that's going live. I'm looking forward to that. And then, have you used Descript at all? Is that something?
So I have looked at Descript, but because I use Adobe stuff with Premiere, they have text-based editing there too. But I know that there's the whole AI component with Descript. It's just, I can't remember, is it Opus or Descript that you pay per minute for?
So I have Descript, and for anybody listening, it's a great tool for a producer to use, where you can take audio to and video, translate it into text. You can edit via text. You can do whole productions on it now. It's kind of crazy. For me, I it's just a monthly fee that you pay for, not per word, but it's one of those producer tools where it's like, if I didn't have it, I don't. I don't know. It would be a hard learning curve back. So I've found it to be super helpful. But just when I was thinking about when you were talking about the clips and the text, super helpful. Super helpful.
Very, very cool. I do it the poor man's way, where I grab the transcripts and throw it in ChatGPT and then say, do not change any words in this, and just give me back. Anyway.
Yeah. Cool.
Whatever works, right? Whatever works.
Thank you for sharing, Elizabeth. Vincenzo, what you working on? Who are you? And your thoughts on this production conversation?
Yeah, Vincenzo here, a longtime restaurateur, restaurant tech builder. And I'm also at the intersection of deal origination and I guess providing support on UI UX as it relates to creating the best version of a system, feature, or a platform that might get introduced to the restaurant space. But yeah, guys, great job on the opening act. I have to agree with you that production can take on all kinds of shapes and forms based on the stakeholders involved. So, and I'm constantly learning as I'm, I guess, interacting with more and more stakeholders. But at the end of the day, a lot of these thoughts or concepts or ideas really distill down into, what's most important, why you might be working on it, and what needs to be measured so that things are actually crossing the goal line and getting completed. Yeah, so I guess as far as how I approach production, I usually like starting with a flywheel. It's usually an eight component flywheel, and it touches on those 8 areas, which starts with looking at the sales lens, right? What might be impacted as it relates to your sales pipeline? How does it impact, I guess, product development with your engineering team? Are you using like a Moscow ICE type framework, where Moscow stands for must have, should have, could have, or won't have, and then the ICE stands for the impact, the confidence, and the ease of it, right? And then, so what is the next component? So we talked about the sales, product, execution. How do you go about executing? What does the finish line even look like, right? How do you keep people accountable as it relates to that finish line, your goal line? The next component of the flywheel is cash. How are you managing your cash, right? Do you have a budget in place for this thing? And do you have a contingency reserve in place for unexpected surprises? Because a lot of people don't bake in the contingency reserve, which usually should be about roughly about 10% of your project budget, because you're going to be hit with unexpected surprises, right? So that's 4 components of the cog. Another one is, what is your legal lens on all this, right? Are you compliant? Do you have the right agreements in place as you're thinking about all this? Another component is assurance. What type of quality controls do you have in place? Are you performing a user accuracy test, or are you auditing your tech stack as the changes come about? Another thing, marketing. How are you going to market this thing? What type of content are you going to bring in, and how are you shaping the messaging of your content so that the right hooks are in place, right? And the last thing is your people, right? How are you managing the information, the decisions, and the actions as it relates to your strategic people, your tacticians, and then your operators, right? Is it flowing, up, top down, bottom up? So I've got the flywheel. The next component is, do I have an OKR structured? Do we know what the objectives are, the key results, right, that are driving it? And are people clear on that? And are you performing retrospectives to make sure you're understanding what's working, what's not, and you're avoiding just throwing things over the wall just to say things are being done, right? So, and then the other big thing that I use is when you're intersecting with your people or communicating with them on a routine basis, what are the insights you're gathering, or you think you should be gathering before your calls, right? What are the inflection points of the decisions you have to make, and then how do you go about stress testing this stuff, right? Do you have a good path to stress test it? And when you do, who do you bring in to challenge those assumptions? Because on my teams, I usually like to dedicate one contrarian thinker, and the people on the team don't need to know who that person is. When you bring that person in to challenge that assumption, it makes the approach or concept, I think, a bit more robust. So that's a question that I might have for you guys, both Kyle and Mike. Do you guys have like that contrarian thinker that lives on your Cali BBQ team?
Yeah, his name is Shawn Walchef. That's
yeah, so that's a bit about how I approach production. So yeah, thanks.
No, that's great. I actually had a follow-up for you, Vincenzo. I was curious. Yeah, you touched on retrospectives, and retrospectives are something that I've got a bit of a love-hate with after working for a long time in software development. I love them when we're in them. I hate the lack of accountability that usually comes from them. So I'm curious if you've got any tips, any insights on what it looks like to implement a strategy where like we can have the retrospectives, we can have the hard discussions, we can talk about what worked, what didn't. From a software development world, it's usually a 2-week sprint, right? And you sit down and have a retrospective at the end of the sprint. Here's the stuff we got done. Here's the stuff we missed. What didn't. This is all great, but then everyone kind of goes back to their day, right? And nothing really changes. We have the same conversation again in 2 weeks. I've lived that life at many different companies. So curious if you got any insights on that, on what practical ways to implement some of that feedback.
It's tough because I experienced the same things, to this day, just like you, right? But one thing that I strap onto the retrospective is a 4R approach, which is review the, what was achieved, right? See if you can remove any friction that might exist there that can support improving result, right? And then what can you rework from that? And then lastly, how do you go about rewarding the people on these project teams? Right? How do you reward them in a simple way? Do you get them a gift card, or maybe you offer them an incentive bonus of some sort if they do get this over the goal line in a completed way that you're satisfied with? So it's really just maybe removing the friction, the areas that are not working, and then maybe giving a light reward. I don't know of any other better way, but that's what I've learned from some of the thought leaders that I've been looking to support me on this. So
but that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
It's cool learning all of this stuff, because when I started working and I got into my career in radio production and on-air radio, there is none of this. It is just go and good luck. And I think back to, just me now, I'm 42. I really started in the business like at 21-ish, 22-ish.
Oh, wow.
And just all the things now I know just about how to work, how to communicate, that I would tell myself then, when it was just like, good luck, figure it out. And if you can't do it, somebody else will. So just really cool, Vincenzo. A lot of the stuff, I'm not a part of necessarily, but just that it's in place and it's a part of your routine in a sense. I love to hear. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't do that stuff, Mike, you lose money. So you got to do it.
Yep. Makes sense. Joe, welcome. Who you are, what you're working on, and your feelings and thoughts on this production conversation.
Yeah. So Joe here, I help run Revmo AI. We are a conversational AI company. So we help implement specifically in the hospitality space, kind of alleviating the phones ringing in the business and addressing the customers initially, and providing them with the resources they want when they call into a restaurant. So and me in the partnership space, like I find myself continuously going to a drawing board and trying to find, I'm always on the hunt of like, how do I create more value for someone else within my own product, and within what I'm doing and within what I'm bringing to the market. And so, and what's really opened my eyes and ears is the production type of stuff, right? The content creation, seeing it out there, which is attracting me to then go and say like, hey, how do I work with this person? Like I've even done that with Shawn, like, and I started following him and connecting with him and, seeing his stories and seeing what he's doing. And it made me reach out and, connect with him and learn more about how he ties in his specialty and what his expertise is in the marketplace to provide value to others. And, and his big thing is video first, right? And creating that story and sharing that story, right? So, as I'm going out, I'm like, hey, if someone's out there speaking on a video and continuously doing that, one, they're very confident in themselves, right? And two, they're very confident in whatever they're speaking about, because it takes a lot to do that, instead of just sending out an email or making a phone call or just posting something on LinkedIn, right? Creating that video, making that effort. So, and I'm like, why are they doing that? Why are they wanting more people? Why are they wanting more attention? Why are they wanting more interactions? And, and I'm a very direct person where, I'll just come in and ask them like, hey, like, I'm interested to know, like, why are you doing this? Why are you creating a lot of content? Why are you, why are you wanting to get this message out? And I think sometimes you can think it's a very rhetorical response, but everyone has their own response in what they say and how they do things. And so, depending on what someone says and what someone talks about, and when you ask them that direct of a question, will lead you into going and saying, oh, interesting. Like, one, I wasn't prepared for that response. So like, maybe let me rethink on how I was going to carry this conversation with them. And better yet, it then provides me a different viewpoint and a different approach into how I could bring value to someone else, or how I could work with someone else, or how I could even in a sense take advantage of someone else's value. Right. So, but it's hard to do, it's not easy to do. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of resilience. And so, when I'm going out and I'm finding new relationships and new people to either integrate the technology with, or to empower people to take to the market, is what I focus on doing. I sit back and I'm a big listener initially, right? Like, once again, I'm evaluating whatever you're doing online, whatever your website's saying, whatever you're talking about on the content, what your messaging is, what's your level of confidence out there in the space. Maybe what are you doing differently than the next best customer, or the next best product that does similar things to what you're doing, or company that does what you do. And I'm coming in and I'm saying, what you're providing here is got my attention, right? So I want to learn more about what matters to you and what's going to bring you to the finish line, right? So I kind of go into this phase of, I like to say, of like, I'm almost in a sense like in there to listen to everything that's being said, and what you're trying to accomplish and what your goals are, and where you're maybe trying to create separation in the market, right? And ideally, in the perfect scenario, is I'm finding an opportunity where I can come in and actually provide a ton of value for them to accomplish those goals and accomplish what they're trying to get to. So I would, I think this is a little bit of a common question, but when it comes to, back to you guys in a sense of, I actually am just launching a podcast here for Revmo. And we just recorded our first episode last week. Should be going live hopefully at some point this week. And it was a really good experience. And, just recently I got back from FS Tech. We created a lot of content there, which is a technology show for restaurants. And starting to see, and I'm starting to try to get out there a little bit more to share with people like, hey, I'm just not some average Joe, right? And so it's starting to get there, right? I'm starting to get some feedback and starting to get some transparency, which is really great. And so how do you balance it all, right? Like, how do you balance the creation? How do you balance that with your everyday job, right? Like, I always say this at the end of the day, like, content does create you value, but like, in a sense, it's not immediate, and it's not in a sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, measurable immediately, right? Like, it typically takes time to see it be a return of investment. So, how do you balance that in a position where you guys are focusing on it, I guess, but like, at the end of the day, you still got to do things that generate revenue for you, right? You got to make sure you're tying revenue to it. So I'll kind of leave it open-ended in a way of like, I'd love to hear kind of where you guys' mind goes and what you think.
No, that's a great take on things, and I loved a lot of what you had to say there. And I would champion, you are not an average Joe, but I do think Revmo Joe has a good ring to it. So I'm just going to throw that out there as a potential option. Alternative to average Joe, we got Revmo Joe. So just a couple things I wanted to sort of touch on. You mentioned the power of listening and how valuable that is. And I remember I was probably 15 or 16, and I found a copy of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People sitting on my dad's bookshelf. And I was like, yeah, all right, cool. This sounds like something I want to know how to do. So I remember reading it. And years later, like, the one thing from that book that has stuck with me, through the last 20 plus years is the notion that the best conversationalists are the ones that talk the least. And I notice it now, and I've noticed it for years now, that the people I enjoy conversing with the most are the ones that take the time to listen to what I'm saying. And so I actively tried to do that same thing. So I think there's such a value in that, both from a learning perspective in a business lens, but just in a authenticity perspective, like building good relationships with people. I mean, Dale Carnegie says that's how you win friends and influence people. So, I mean, there's got to be something to it, right? So I just wanted to call that out because I could not agree with you more. And I echo that sentiment wholeheartedly. speaking to the question you had there at the end, Joe, of what does it look like to actually balance all of these things, right? Like you still got to make money, but we still got to create content. I think that's a really important question that often gets overlooked. I will tell you firsthand, I do a terrible job of like promoting my own business. Like there's just too much other stuff, right? Like I end up working on all these other things, all these other priorities take over. I think every business owner that's been around in the social media age has probably experienced that or felt that at some time. I will do my best to channel Shawn here because I think he's one of the best the best examples of how to do it. And like I think with Shawn, it really is just as simple as like just doing it. Like he doesn't overthink it, and it doesn't have to be overproduced. It's not something that it doesn't have to take 2 weeks to get a piece of content out. Shawn will pull out the phone, he'll take the picture, he'll take the video, selfie style, post edit. Like we don't have to overthink it. There's a time and a place for like really polished, really highly produced stuff. That stuff's it's got a place. We make plenty of that content for ourselves and for our clients. It's important in a lot of ways, but I think getting the reps in is like the most important thing because like you said, you just started a podcast, right? You're gonna come back and listen to that first podcast episode a year from now. You'd be like, God, I've gotten so much better since that first one. And it's just doing the reps and it's taking that first step. And so I don't unfortunately have a great answer for like the magic antidote of how to balance the time in all these things because I still struggle with it myself of like figuring out when do I make the time to do these things? Like, what do I need to do to just commit? And I don't always do a good job of that. That's something I need to hold myself accountable to. But I do think the first step in that is just ripping the Band-Aid off and just getting stuff out there and not being overly concerned about what the reaction is going to be, within reason, obviously. Let's make sure we're being mindful of the stuff that we're putting out in the world. But like, not everything has to get 100 likes. Not everything has to get, 1,000 views. All of those things matter. And one of the things we really, really try to focus on with all of the content we produce at Cali BBQ Media, like we really devalue views, I think, than most, agencies or content creation, whatever you want to call us. Like we views are not as important to us as the quality of the viewer, and we want to make sure that we're getting to the right audience. And so making sure that what we're putting out is speaking to the audience that we are interested in speaking to with any given piece of content, whatever that is, and understanding that audience as intimately as we can. Shawn, being a restaurant owner, helps us a lot with that because he can paint a perspective. Us having, an inside track to people that work as restaurant operators, work as back of house staff. That's something that I think makes us unique and really gives us a good perspective because a lot of times, restaurant operators are the target audience for us. So I think ripping the Band-Aid off, understanding that target audience, and just getting stuff out there that is in one way or another going to speak to them. Because if you get 10 views, but those 10 views lead to one conversation, or you get 10,000 views and those 10,000 views lead to one conversation, what's the damn difference, right? Like at the end of the day, they all amount to the same thing that matters to you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kyle. And I think, Joe, you understand that because the way you pose the question in your mind, you understand that you're not going to post the first video and 3.6 billion downloads. And if you go with the mindset of why I'm creating this show to begin with, if it's, for fame and fortune and to become the next big celebrity host, okay, that's a different mindset. But if it's to create revenue and business and use what Kyle is saying and going with a concept of, all right, I need to hit just this right amount of people, I think you're in the right headspace and just reminding yourself that. And then for me, I have a basketball podcast I don't do a good enough job personally with promoting it, but what I do a lot of the production side, but my co-host is all over the social side. So if you're working with somebody, figuring out roles early, like, all right, you're going to do this, I'm going to do that. So I stay in my lane I do the pre-production, production, post-production. He does everything social media and does a great job with it. And then we meet in the middle when we record.
Yeah, delegation is important for sure. What's up, Elizabeth?
Sorry, I have to unmute in multiple places apparently. A couple of things. Joe, the more bang for your buck type of post is if you are interviewing anyone with your content and you're going to make a social media post, make one that highlights them and highlights what they said in it to point it back, because if you collaborate with them on Instagram or you tag them, they'll reshare it to their audiences. And so it gives it that nice boost, but it's also a thank you to them for their time coming on. So if you're going to pour your chips, if you're like, okay, I can only do one post this week, then put them in something that you're cross-pollinating audiences. The other thing is with the type of content, if you're recording the podcast, I don't know if you're just doing audio or if you're also capturing it in video, but I use the cake pop theory, where the podcast is the whole cake. Like it's the meaty part. It's got everything. But if you take little cake pops from it, you're going to decorate it. It's going to have the same flavor on the middle, same decorations. It's going to have this little flavor that when you make your social media posts, that you put out that cake pop and you intentionally aren't giving them everything, but you want to give them that little bit of a taste of here's what you could have, and then always point back or link back to the bigger piece of content to say, if you want to hear the rest of our conversation, go and check it out. And but thinking of it in the sense of I can't shove the whole cake in front of somebody and then be able to digest it. But if I could pull out these little parts that I can give them a taste of it and then point back to where they can find the rest of it. And finally, being familiar with the different platforms and how you insert those links is important. To not say tap the link in the like in Instagram, you don't have links in captions or in the post. You can get the bots that say comment with this, like mini chat, comment with this, and it'll DM them that, which is a great way to start conversations in the DM, because you have, again, you're not talking to everybody. If you can think about the one person that you're talking to, that eliminates that stuff. But like on LinkedIn, you can say the link is in the comments or something like in your caption or something like that, so that making sure you're familiarizing and supplying them with the easiest onboarding ramp to go and be able to listen or subscribe or whatever action that you're wanting them to take. But yeah, I like to think about it in cake pop and give them the most flavory bits that build curiosity.
Love it. It's great stuff.
Joe, I'll add a quick point to understanding whether something's worth working on or focusing on based on you questioning the value of it, right? So there's a theory called Lindy effect, and it was popularized by Nassim Taleb in his book called Anti-Fragile. I don't know if you guys have heard of him or not. Great contrarian thinker. He's an empirical scientist or empirical thinker, right? And he said, you got to work on something for 100 days, right? If you didn't do it for at least 100 days, you're not going to learn anything. But if it worked, a few things worked during that 100-day period, it'll probably work for the next 100 days, getting you to a 200-day point. And if it worked and crystallized during that 200-day period, most likely it's going to work for the next 350 days, right? Mm-hmm. He's just saying you got to really focus on the first 100 days or the first 100 times of doing something, and you're just going to learn just from stacking the skill set, and eventually just getting lucky by being a mile deep in something, right? So
yeah, that's good.
Concept could help,
Yeah, I love it. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there, Vincenzo, is important, because those repetitions, not only are they gonna make you better, but that 100-day analogy isn't one that I'd heard before, but I actually really like that. I think you mentioned luck in there, and I can't help but think of doing those reps also just open more opportunities, right? Like you're just putting more doors in front of yourself that could potentially open. Whether they do or not is a future problem, right? We'll figure that out as we go, and whether you want to walk through them when they do open is a decision you get to make at that point as well. But just giving yourself the shot, like those reps are a great way to line yourself up, for the future. So I love that, and being able to quantify that looking ahead is a really helpful mechanism. So I appreciate that framing.
Yeah,
we did that a lot. I played a lot of football growing up, and I remember my senior year, my offensive coordinator, he was a wizard when it came to running an offense. We ran a wing T offense, and so it was a very run-heavy offense, multiple running backs, a lot of movement in the offense, pulling guards and stuff. And he would never go to the game without running and like being confident in that play without us running it 100 times, right? Like it was like you have to run the play 100 times to say that you're confident in knowing it. And he was like, that's across the board. I don't care if you're a lineman. I don't care if you're running back. I don't care if you're a quarterback. He said, that's when you know that you're confident in it. And better yet, he goes, through that, you'll learn, right, where the weak is, where the strength is. You'll identify that. And I remember one game, we actually ended up running a play from the 5-yard line to the goal line and scoring. We ran the same play. It was like 15 times in a row we ran it. And it was just like, it was crazy because like we talked about this analogy he always used is 100 plays. You got to run it 100 times in order to like be in a sense confident in it. Even though like it works great and maybe it's scored you touchdowns in the past, even if you've only done it a few times, it doesn't mean it's a great play, right? So, and then he went out and we ran and I remember I was sitting in the huddle and I was like, I was just like, we already know, like, guys, we already know what to do. Let's just get up on the line. You know what I mean? And like we got to the 50 and then like we got to like the 35 and like it continued. So that's a good call out.
It reminds me of Bruce Lee. Like, what did he always say? Fear not the person that knows 1,000 kicks, but the guy that knows one kick and has done it 1,000 times.
Yeah,
it is.
Right?
I know if Shawn was here, I could just hear him in his head talking about comedians and telling your story. If you've told it 100 times, just how much more confident and how better it'll sound because you've done it, the repetition over and over again to all your points. Dean LeBay. Dean, who are you, what you're working on, and your feelings on production?
Hey, my name is Dean LeBay, LA-BAY. I work for Cali BBQ Media as a social guy, media consultant. Yeah, good conversation. But Joe, here I'm 65, and here's what I look at. A lot of people talk about the ROI, the return on the investment. I look at it from the cost of inaction. If you do nothing, you get nothing. If you don't ask for the sale, the answer will always be no. It just, you have to ask. And just like y'all were talking about, just like when you were in football running those plays, the first time you do it, it's awkward. It's like the first time you go out, first time you went out with your wife, it was awkward. It was kind of, you didn't know your way around and wasn't sure, but you grew that and because you had passion for it and it became more and it became a relationship. It's the same way with business. Basically, listen, there's a lot of people out there you're going to come across, you're going to talk to them and they're just going to say, listen, I'll pass. I don't want to hear what you got to say. And that's fine. That's not your guy. They did you a favor. That means you get to move on to the next one. Now, as far as production, as far as podcasts, as far as making video, LinkedIn, and all that, it is about doing it over and over and over. Listen, if you could have, I met you and Vinny on this on LinkedIn, but if you could have met me when I was on Clubhouse, it was embarrassing because there was no video, but I know I sounded like a hick from East Texas because that's basically what I was, but I knew nothing. So it's just a matter of, you can't worry about looking foolish. I mean, that's just part of it, but you just you gain from it and you move forward and you find that tribe, you find that rising tide group, that tribe that you find that's going to be there with you when you have a hard time, when you're not feeling confident, when you're struggling. You can pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, listen, I'm struggling with this, but we've talked a few times in Rising Tide. Have you got a minute? And I promise you, everybody within the organization, within the group, that they will take time with you. And that's what makes our group a little bit different than most of these things you see on LinkedIn. There's a lot of groups on LinkedIn, but there's none like the Rising Tide. So I would always look back to cost of inaction. If you do nothing, the answer will always be no. If you don't ask for the sale, it'll always be no. But if you do something, that's better than nothing. That's really all I got. It's a great conversation. Kyle, I've still got so many questions to ask you. I'm still new to the group. Joe and Vinny, with the Cali BBQ group. Man, listen, it's like I'm a cog in the wheel, but they all have got this thing where they kind of finish each other's sentences because they've been working and they know. Sorry, I had a phone call. Anyway,
No,
I'm just waiting to get to that point. Listen, that's all I got. Thanks.
No, Dean, we love having you on the team, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because in the spirit of process that we're talking about today, Dean's our newest team member at Cali BBQ Media. So there's still plenty for us to learn, and the process of what it looks like to have a new team member come on board or to have a new client. It's going to look a little bit different all the time, depending on what's that person's role and like what do we need to focus on as a part of their onboarding is going to be different than, are we onboarding a technology company? Because it might look a little bit different if it's a technology company that we're helping with, the content creation process as opposed to a restaurant group. There might be different things. So again, it comes back to understanding who's on the other side, whatever that is. And, I've spent my career focused on, building good websites, beautiful websites, good user experiences for people across the board. And that's always the most important question, is who's the audience, and understanding that, because until you know that, all the other questions you ask are just going to be, not nearly as useful.
Yeah, great conversation on production today. It's been a lot of fun hearing all the different unique perspectives from different backgrounds getting in. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting to that finish line. So I think this conversation has been awesome for that. Tip, takeaway, homework assignment. We'll start with Elizabeth. And actually, by the way, I'm curious. I'd love feedback here. My USB microphone, when I connect to StreamYard, I realized over the last 2 times, dances on the manual mode where the volume, the gain switches. So I went to something called automatic mode, where I'm hoping it does a little bit better. How does this sound right now?
Sound great.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay, cool.
Like
All right,
Friday,
I switched it. I'm just
Friday. One of them was going like it would.
Yeah.
It was fading with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious to hear.
Mike, you sound great.
Cool. Thank you for the feedback. That's good to know that it works. That's awesome. All right, Elizabeth, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Production is working. So I would say I wanted to go back and connect 2 dots that, Joe, for your podcast, if you're finding yourself not like, so you're going to spend money somewhere. You're either going to, or not spend money, but you're going to spend something. You're either going to spend time doing it yourself, or you're going to spend money paying somebody to do it, or find tools that you pay for to do it. And so I wanted to say, when Mike suggested Descript, it might be a good place to check out, because it sounds like it would generate a lot of this for you. And so just even playing with it for a month, see if it's something that you could use. But you could take your podcast, put it in there. It's going to find those highlight moments. And then it does, quick question, Mike, could it generate captions for you as well for your posts?
Yes, it does have that capability if you want to use it for that. So you could make social media clips, add the captions. It does have that in Descript.
So it's a way for you not to have to reinvent the wheel, but use what you're already capturing to repurpose it across social. So that was going to be my final thing. So I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. With that, Vincenzo, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
I guess for tip, takeaway, homework assignment, I guess good production requires a good process, and to have a good checklist that you might look at every single day. Make it just stare at you in the face, right? And beat it to death every day, and make it the first thing that you look at before you start your day, because it'll really help center your thoughts in a more meaningful way as you're engaging with other people or working on a specific project. I mean, it helps me, and I do this every day, and it works like magic, man. So I hope everyone gives that a shot. All right.
Cool. Thank you, Vincenzo. Joe, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Yeah, reps. Get to 100. I think it's, of course, relative to what we talked about today, for people that are wanting to get into it, people that are doing it, people that have been doing it even 100 times, right? What's the next 100 Vincenzo talked about, right? Like, what's the next 100? What's the next 300 look like? On my journey to 100, and I'm for sure swinging the bat. I'm no doubt about it, and running the place. So I would basically advise everyone that's listening to dial that in and figure that out and start counting and start trying and start doing.
Joe, I have to ask them, what position did you play on offense for football?
I played offensive guard.
Offensive guard?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Now I'm just curious. Dean, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Joe, I play middle linebacker, so I pity you. Anyway, what I would tell you is, the 100 days and all that. You didn't get to where you are in 100 days. You get there one day at a time. You get there one step at a time, and don't worry about the small stuff. And you're always going to have naysayers, and just do it. Just the cost of inaction of holding yourself back. Just do it, and you're going to be fine. We're here to support you. I love meeting you at NRA. I feel a good relationship, and anything I can do to help you, I'm available. So my tip is, bring somebody with you Bring somebody with you Friday. We got Pitch the Tide on Friday. Talk to you later.
Yes, thank you, Dean. And Spencer Michael, back of house, will be here Friday for Pitch the Tide, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So get ready for that. Kyle, tip, takeaway, homework assignment.
Yeah, thank you all for the conversation today. This is a lot of fun. I think two things I'll say. Number one is avoid process for the sake of process. Building processes that are there just to say you've got a process are worse than no process at all. They're going to lead you down. You're going to be chasing red herrings and making things worse for yourself. Number two is focus on that buy-in. Whoever you're building the process for, whether it's yourself, you're trying to build something to manage your daily life better, your daily work tasks. You're trying to build something for a team. You're trying to build a collaboration tool with your clients. You're trying to build something that's going to get released to customers someday, whatever it is. Look for that buy-in, something that people can get behind, they can believe in, and something that they are willing to use and work to be a part of, because the machine only runs if all the parts are working together. So thank you guys again. Great conversation today.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Had a lot of fun doing this. Thank you to the community joining today. As I mentioned before, Spencer Michael, Friday, he'll be here for Pitch the Tides. You want to check that on out, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. My final tip, takeaway, homework assignment. I really enjoyed what you had said at the start of here, Kyle, about generalists and specialists. I'm going to remember that, and I will definitely take away from that and change the way I view production with that in mind. So thank you for that tip. Appreciate it, man. This has been Rising Tides. Thank you, everybody, for coming here Wednesday and Fridays. We see you on next time. Take care, everybody.